I wonder if you could perhaps share some of the mental health challenges that you've had through the transition periods of your career.
I was just about to make that step up to Group Chief Risk Officer. I was actually cycling into the office, as I do. And unfortunately, about 2-3 miles into my journey, I had the misfortune of being hit by a car. So I had a pretty serious accident on my bike. And I think that was really at that time, after that event, was the first time I really encountered any of my own mental health challenges. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Crowe Corner, where we talk to our clients and contacts about the issues and challenges that matter to them. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Martyn Rodden. Martyn is CEO of MSIG UK. He's previously had a number of roles in the MS Amlin Group, including Group CRO, Deputy CEO, and Director of Strategy and Transformation. And he's also had a number of different roles in the insurance industry as Head of Risk and as CRO. Today, we're going to be talking about the transitions that Martyn's made through his career, and also some of the mental health challenges that can come with taking on bigger roles within organisations, and particularly roles that are stressful and full of challenge. Martyn, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Justin.
It'd be great if you could start by giving us a bit of an overview of your career journey, and particularly where you've made a step up to a bigger role.
I've been with the Mitsui Sumitomo group of companies for nearly 9 years now. And I've held a number of different roles during that period. I firstly joined the group as the Deputy Chief Risk Officer. Then in about 2019, I was promoted to the role of Group Chief Risk Officer. So that was the first pretty big step up in terms of a leadership role in a business this size. Since then, I've held a number of different roles. MS Amlin's gone through a series of transformative states over the last 5 years. And it's led me to take on a number of different roles. The Deputy Chief Executive role in the syndicate, then Director of Strategy and Transformation, and most recently I've switched to our sister company, Mitsui Sumitomo Europe Limited, which is now rebranded as MSIG UK.
I wonder if you could perhaps share some of the mental health challenges that you've had through the transition periods of your career.
Yeah, well, there's probably one that's most notable for me. Back in 2017, when I was just about to make that step up to Group Chief Risk Officer. I was actually coming into the office that day for a risk committee, late October, and I was still cycling into the office, as I do. And unfortunately, about 2-3 miles into my journey, I had the misfortune of being hit by a car. So I had a pretty serious accident on my bike, went over the windscreen and the bonnet of the car, crashed into the windscreen, flew off the other side, hit a wall, literally hit a wall and figuratively as well. And I think that was really at that time, after that event, was the first time I really encountered any of my own mental health challenges. Yeah. The recovery from that, apart from the physical injuries that I suffered, which were reasonably extensive, but I was lucky I got away, without any, serious broken bones or mental, like head damage or anything like that. Yeah. But the fright that it gave me and the impact that it had afterwards was quite telling. I basically, once I came back to work, I probably came back firstly too early. So there's a lesson in that. I think, you've got to take the time to recover from something meaningful when it happens. But when I did eventually come back into the office, MS Amlin was going through quite a difficult period at that time. We were under a lot of scrutiny as a result of poor results, and also a lot of regulatory scrutiny, which in the role that I held at that time as Chief Risk Officer was quite high pressured. And the way that it would manifest with me was getting on the train in the morning, Justin, of all things. It was really odd. I used to get on the train and just had a real fear of, I don't know whether it was an enclosed space or the fact that I was coming into work and it was another day of high pressure, possibly, just metaphorically speaking, or just as a result of the anxiety that the accident caused me. But I used to have to get on the train in the morning and essentially put my hood up if it was in the winter, put my earphones in and close my eyes for the whole journey. I just couldn't suffer getting on the train. I found it really difficult. So that kind of became untenable, and I had a conversation with my doctor and I said, look, I'm really struggling with two things: this journey with the train in the morning and also getting back on my bike. And I love cycling. It's just that kind of freedom that you get that I don't think you experience in many other pastimes. So I had a pretty hard-nosed doctor, and she gave me some really wise words. She gave me some pills to help, calm myself down, which I didn't really want to take. But she said, look, I want you to take 2 of these, get on your bike and cycle for as long as you possibly can. Okay. Which I did. I followed her instructions, and the bike thing became no longer an issue. But the managing anxiety from a work perspective has, I think, since then been a feature of my life, quite honestly, and something that I have to pay attention to on a regular basis. Thankfully, it's much more under control than it has been at previous points, but still something that I'm really mindful of.
Yeah, so I guess, all of us have those feelings of being overwhelmed from time to time through the amount of work that we've got, or through particular stresses and strains that happen. Now, what sort of coping strategies do you deploy to deal with those, stress, or when you can feel you're at risk of burnout? How do you manage that, and what activities help you to do that?
For me, it's really just about lifestyle and trying to get the right balance. A lot of people said that COVID was, very difficult for them. For me personally, I found it like, you'll remember it was a lovely summer that first year. It was like a shining light. The fact of not having to do that commute when it had been so stressful, the opportunity to be more outdoors, albeit you couldn't be with other people, was something that I found really helpful. And it just made me think about my own well-being on a more general level. And over the past 5 years, I've tried to pick up a number of different things. I started boxing, firstly, at that time. And boxing has now become probably the thing that I look forward to most every week. I do it at 7 o'clock every Saturday morning. Come hell or high water. And it's one of those sports where, as you can imagine, if you're not fully focused, you're going to get hit. So you have to be really in the zone. And so, but from a mental perspective and from a mental well-being perspective, I find it's something that really helps me zone out from all the things that have happened in the week and just focus on being in the moment at that time. But over and above that, there's a number of things. I've got myself a dog. And, again, being out in the outdoors, having opportunities to walk him and take him out in fresh air and just have someone else that's reliant on you is really helpful. And then finally, one of the things that I did turn to when I was suffering from anxiety in a more acute sense was meditation and guided meditation. And that just used to really help calm me. So I think that's something that I still try and practice to this day, is breathing techniques to help me just stay on top of difficult moments and stay calm in the moment. But over and above that, Justin, it's really just trying to look after my health. I'm not, I'm not 21 anymore. I'm fast approaching 50, and therefore just getting that balance right in my life between work and all the other things that you've got going on, and trying to have a space between both work and home life is something that I try and hold, and I cherish it as well.
How does that impact on the way that you lead the business now and have that focus on well-being and a resilient culture, I guess, from a people perspective?
Certainly working in the company that I've worked in for the last 9 years, there's been a lot of change, a lot of transformation and a lot of scrutiny. And that undoubtedly brings pressures with it. And one of the things that I really try and role model at the moment is I like to be in the office early. So I'm often in for 7:30, but I try and make a really wholehearted attempt to leave at 5:30 or 5 o'clock, whatever it might be at the end of the day. So that's something that I try and role model that, because in the Japanese culture, in the business that we work in, working long hours is something that's pretty much the norm. And so I have to try and set the standard for people to say, look, it is important that you have that balance between home and work life as well. So that's the first part. I think the second part is, from a leadership perspective, I try and get that right with my team, with the executive that I work with, both trying to give them opportunities to check in on them, just as simple as how you doing. Within the organisation, I think there's a lot more opportunities to provide support and guidance than there ever has been. I think, as I say, in the world of insurance, we're not saving lives. We're not on the front line like, the armed forces or the police or ambulance services. We are, for all intents and purposes, pen pushers. But that doesn't mean that the stresses are necessarily any different. And I think the fact that every organisation, I think, around the city is much more attuned to the importance of well-being and mental health in their organisations and the damages that it can do if it's not managed properly.
Is there any other advice that you'd give to leaders around how they support good mental health in their organisations?
One of the great things that we do in this organisation now is mental health first aid. And that's something that I think you can't underestimate. You can see when someone's got a cut in their arm, but you can't see, what's necessarily going on between their ears or how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis. And I've certainly experienced a number of examples in this organisation where people have been impacted. There's times where I think I've missed that, and colleagues have missed that. And so the ability to be able to spot the signs, to try and help and intervene is something it's really important, because time can make all the difference. The other part that we have in the MS group more generally is various different employee forums, whether that's just an opportunity to meet like-minded people or to talk about some of the common challenges that we face, and essentially just give people a platform to say it's okay to talk about these things, and try and make it as normalised as possible. The way that you'll get people to feel comfortable with it is by generating trust, and therefore making it acceptable to talk about and acknowledge and provide support mechanisms around it is really, really important.
No, I totally buy into that as well. And I think similar to you, we have a mental health first aider group in Crowe that have a big impact on the business and really helpful.
Yeah.
From your journey then, just broadening things out a little bit, are there any kind of lessons that you'd share, particularly with people that are perhaps stepping up into the CRO role, or maybe those people that are stepping out of the CRO role into a different role?
Stepping up into the CRO role, that is that's a fascinating first challenge. I think it really depends on the circumstances upon which you're moving into the role. There's often a number of reasons. It could be that the position has become vacant because someone's moved on, or it could be because, in similar to situations that I've had, we've had a change in leadership because the business is in a difficult position, or going through a transitionary period. So the first thing that I would really recommend is understanding the landscape that sits in front of you as a chief risk officer. It's a really challenging role. I think probably the most challenging role second to the chief executive, because the CEO has the responsibility for the whole organisation. Quite often the chief risk officer is seen as the conscience for the whole organisation, and therefore they've got a really difficult role. So understanding that the context and the landscape that's in front of you, so that you can think about the strategy that you've got to take forward in the first instance is really important. And what I mean by that is, are you in a situation where you're building on something? So if you've left, if you're assuming the role of somebody who's left and been very successful, retiring, whatever it might be, well, how do you garner the confidence of the organisation, the respect of the organisation? Risk is often a thing that people see as a necessary evil rather than value creation, although that has changed. So you've got to think about, well, how do I make this my own stamp, but also take the function forward, maybe modernise it? Similarly, if you're in a more of a defensive position, how do you get a sense of the team that you have? How do you get a sense of what the organisation needs to move forward? And therefore, I think in all instances, it's about the context and then the diagnosis that you perform. I think undertaking that diagnosis is probably one of the most important things that you'll do stepping into a chief risk officer role for the first time or the second time, whatever it may be, and one that will give you some really good information to help develop your risk strategy going forward. The second part for me would be having a really strong network of people around you. And I mean that both internally, whether that's amongst your fellow executives, or externally, maybe through people like yourself. We've known each other for a long time, so people you advise you, give you, some ideas, some thoughts, or other people that you trust outside the organisation that can just give you a different lens from maybe another industry. So having, the diagnosis and then some trusted advisors around you to bounce things off of will often set you on the right course. I think the second part of your question was moving beyond the chief risk officer role. I'm actually surprised that there aren't more chief risk officers that transition into a chief executive role. I think the perspective that you get on the organisation in risk is probably one of the most fortunate positions that any exec gets to be in. You have to take an organisational and enterprise lens across the challenges that the business faces. So you get to see pretty much everything that goes on in the organisation. So I think there is a natural progression that I can see between the two roles, but you have to change your mindset. You're not just about risk. And often, again, risk and chief risk officers can be seen as, fund prevention or risk prevention, but it's not. It's about trying to accentuate that balance between managing the downside, but also being able to understand the opportunities in the organisation as well. So for me, I was fortunate. I took a deputy CEO role, and that deputy CEO role held a number of responsibilities that kind of transitioned me quite nicely from risk into a kind of first line position. And then I built on that with my next step in strategy and transformation, where I did a number of projects on acquisitions and disposals of parts of our business and reorganisation. So over time, I branched out in a relatively structured manner from this CRO role into what is now a chief executive role. And those steps that I took, which were quite deliberate and fortunately deliberate, both from the organisation's perspective, the shareholders' perspective, and some of the other leaders that I worked around to help me identify some of the weaknesses that I had. So, stepping into the role in February this year as MSIG UK's CEO felt pretty seamless, to be honest, and one that I'm really relishing at the moment. Excellent.
No, that's good to hear. And you've, as part of your journey, you've worked with us at Crowe.
Yeah.
What's it like working with us?
Good question. I mean, you're a very pleasant man, Justin, and I think everyone that I've worked with in your business, in the Crowe business, I think are really, firstly, service-oriented in terms of, I think what you try and do is provide quite a pragmatic response to the challenges that organisations face. It's not just coming in and saying we've got a cookie-cutter approach to this particular challenge that you might be facing. So my experience has been that in the first instance, your own diagnosis of what it is that we're looking for, our requirements, is something that you spend quite a bit of time trying to understand. And then, again, behind that, I think you've also understood the context of the organisation and where it is and how you can help them, whether that's to make a tough decision, or to give them assurance about something. I've found that you're pretty adept at being able to understand that. So I think that pragmatism is something that I think is very valuable. I think the other part that I've seen in the work that we've done with you and I've done with you over time is you try and make that enduring. So it's something that you build into the business. It's not just a report or a glossy piece of paper that satisfies a board or somebody else. It's something that tries to make a difference in terms of the recommendations typically that you see being proposed. So for me, that's where I think I've had value from Crowe, because some of the steps, when they're pragmatic and they're enduring, it typically helps engender some change in the business and makes that piece of work more valuable.
That's lovely. Thank you, Martyn. And look, thank you ever so much for sparing the time today to share your experiences with us. I think lots of really good practical tips to help people to deal with the stresses and strains of their roles. So thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our session today with Martyn talking about his journey to CRO and from CRO to CEO and the mental health challenges that can come with tough, demanding roles. If you'd like to discuss anything that we've covered today, then feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you soon.